Hi and welcome to the second video of the book reading Orgasmic Blueprint, and we're starting today straight with chapter 1, and I will read about 3-4 sub-chapters, and I hope you enjoy. Alright, so chapter 1, subchapter Foundations of Somatic Consent, tuning into your authentic self. So touch is the first language we speak. That's a quote from Stephen Gaskin. What are your fondest, earliest memories of touch? One of mine is sitting on my father's lap and feeling his whiskers tickling my face. It felt so nice and a little scratchy. Another is the feeling of a fresh duvet cover after a bath. Another, the cozy sensation of my big toe rubbing against my second toe. That felt amazing. I remember it so well because we 3 kids were small. We slept in my parents' bed with our heads at the foot end, and I rubbed my toes together to create a self-calming sensation if I was still awake and the others were sleeping. All these memories are from the age of 3 or 4 years old. We have all, however, been touched against our will by being washed, fed, dressed, and held before we could speak and choose. We've all therefore learned very deep patterns of belief that the action coming towards us is more important than how we feel about it. For most of us, this result is trying to change how we feel about what is happening rather than changing with confidence what is happening. One fundamental truth we all share is a deep desire to touch and be touched in a way that is intimate and profound, exactly how we want to. The core of this book helps you to unveil the authentic desire of your true self and shows you how to express what you really want while allowing others to do the same. What you realize is that we all, in fact, have a choice. The impact of touch. To be human is to feel and experience emotions. And if we look at common detail verbal expressions, it's clear that our sense of touch is intrinsically emotional. Please keep in touch. That person rubs me up the wrong way. I didn't mean to hurt your feelings. I can't stand their slippery politician. I'm touched by what you said. When we encounter someone who is emotionally clumsy, we call them tactless, which literally means they lack the ability to be in touch with the other. So how does this connection between emotions and the senses of touch form? It begins very early in life. Your nervous system, its ability to perceive sensory touch was developed and activated before birth, so that by the time you were born, your sense of touch was already established. The inflow of sensation from contact with your primary caregivers caused the first adaptive neurological mechanism to take place, activating the ventral vagus nerve responsible for social engagement through expressions of emotions. The inflow of sensations is a preverbal primordial system and therefore functions as your default scheme of communication and relating to the world around you. It forms the very base of your feelings of safety and of human connections. People born without the sense of sight or with a hearing disability can develop great bodies and minds, experience a great life. But those born either without the biological components of a sense of touch or don't receive touch during their infancy and first years of life experience disastrous consequences. That's what happens in orphans in Romania during the Ceausescu regime in the 1970s, and what followed in the 1980s is grossly understaffed Sorry, of form, just English is not my language. So with no one having the time to hug, hold, caress or be loved in a tactile way towards these children, terrible results began to unfold. The children developed compulsive self-soothing rocking motions, attached disorders, and cognitive delays, which weren't just neurophysiological problems. Due to touch deprivation, their general growth was stunted and their gastrointestinal and immune system was underdeveloped and compromised. Studies include that 30 minutes of loving touch a day has tremendously positive effect on development. And this minimal amount of hugging and limb manipulation were enough to completely reverse all of the harmful effects of previous touch deprivation in orphans and incubated babies. The critical role of touch within childhood development wasn't always understood. In the 20s, John B. Watson, the founder of the psychological movement behaviorism, advised parents to never touch or hug their children unless they were being rewarded for an extraordinarily good job or difficult task. Advising in this case to pat them on the head and give them a handshake at the end of the day. Yeah. Thankfully, these days, most parents don't raise their children this way. However, it can be very different situation outside of the home where no touch policies exist for supervisory adults such as teachers and coaches. In a good way. While these laws are well-meaning, they're not always truly helpful. If a young child reaches to get a reassuring hug from their teacher, it is what they need somatically at that moment. Touch is a social good and an opportunity to create bonds of trust, cooperation, and empathy. Touch is social glue. It is the key to our survival. It's what binds sexual partners into lasting couples. It's what bonds parents to their children, and it connects people in community together with the workplace to productive, effective teams. In this book, Touch, the Science of Hand, Heart, and Mind, neurobiologist David J. Linden states that doctors who appropriately touch their patients during an examination are rated as more caring, and more importantly, their patients produce lower stress hormone levels and higher healing results. In 2010, the National Baseball Association completed a wonderful study on teamwork. They watched videos of all teams in the NBA games in the first half of the season and had people note down all of the instances of celebratory touch. This included all pats on the chest or buttocks, high fives, and any other touch that team members made to celebrate a basket. They come up with an index of celebratory touch for each team and hypothesized, got some words are really interesting to read, hypothesized whatever the index of the first half of the baseball season would predict what would happen in the second half. The results found that teams engaging in more celebratory touch won more games in the second half of the season. More importantly, these teams played in a more cooperative fashion, for example, the star being more likely to pass the ball to another player who had a better chance of a shot. According to the touch test study of almost 40,000 people in more than 110 countries, and more than half of us say we are not getting enough touch in our lives. This leads to touch hunger, when our feelings of connections, empathy, and trust slowly degrade. There's been much research into a recognition of the importance of touch. However, there's been very little research into the specifics of this incredible sense. Let's begin to explore why the majority of us are numb to the infinity possibility of our senses of touch that can touch offer, and how to wake up these hidden wonders, which affect not only our capacity to feel more pleasure, but heighten every single aspect of our lives. You're literally holding with this book, the key that unlocks this new world within your hands. So why waking up your hands work? If I were to ask which part of your body directs your perspective, your opinion, reasoning, and the judgment of what's right or wrong for you, would you point to your hands? Some might be driven by their hearts, but the truth seems most of us identify so much with our intellect that we use our bodies as convenience vehicle to transport our minds from A to B. What your hands can do is form the bridge between rational and conditional thinking. To grounded knowledge of who you are at your core and totality. Beginning with your hands, you are able to shine a light on the truth of your very being by discovering yourself in a completely embodied way. From this embodied perspective, you are able to function in a fully informed and authentic way from within, a balance and harmony with what is right for you. Your hands are tools you use to make sense of the world around you. They have an incredible amount of nerve cells which relay the information they encounter directly to your brain. And each nerve cell or neuron has a long cable that snakes away from it. This cable, several times thinner than a human hair, is called an axon or nerve fiber. A nerve is an enclosed bundle of axons and is where electrochemical impulses from the neurons in your hands travel to the spinal cord where their synapses make contact with other nerve cells, which in turn sends the information to the thalamus and sensory cortex in your brain. So we experience touch as an unified sensation, but is actually created by different specialized sensors working in parallel. We have many different kinds of nerve endings in our skin, and each one is a micro machine specialized in transferring a certain kind of information. So different objects feel different when you touch them, right? One kind of nerve detects heat and another cold. One registers pain and another registers sexual sensations, vibrations, pressure, and texture. The density of different kinds of nerve endings vary depending on where they are on your body, which is why you experience different sensations from the same object on different parts of your body. One type of nerve endings called the C-tactile afferent is specifically linked to pleasant touch and is most responsive during slow, gentle stroking. We are hardwired to like this kind of touch. In babies, it stabilizes heart rate, can improve weight gain, and forms the first part of social bonding. Sensory neurons are the brain's portal to the external world. So your fingertips have a high density of nerves which cause the Merkel ending, which are the best at detecting fine tactile forms. You'll have noticed that your lips, tongue, genitals, and cornea are very sensitive too, but you wouldn't be able to read Braille with them. This is because these parts of the body aren't discriminative as they have less Merkel endings. I'm sure you have experienced getting something in your eye. Although it can really hurt, it's actually very hard to tell precisely where in the eye it is. So I'm sure you'll get that anything we bring our attention to in the moment jumps to the forefront in our experience. So when we focus on a problem, it's called worrying. When we focus on a lower lover, it's called, on a new lover, it's called obsession. When we focus on a new subject, it calls learning. Focus makes our experience more profound. This also happens with the messages being relayed by our nerves. By bringing your awareness to the sensations being picked up by your nerve endings, you amplify your experience of them. This is, of course, easier said than done. It's hard to focus when we are distracted by constant environmental stimuli. However, that's not the only reason we have trouble noticing the sensation. There's another cog in the works. We all accept many beliefs without question, beliefs which limit our ability to receive. So, how we are programmed to give while in action. It's more blessed to give than to receive. It's a quote from the Bible. So we are all conditioned in this way. So your hands are exceptionally equipped to pick up all the tactile information you need, including tremendous amount of pleasure. Unfortunately, most people are oblivious to this gold mine of potential. And over time, we lose the ability to feel to our full capacity and become numb to our experience. However, if your sensory nerves are healthy and undamaged, it's possible to relearn that. So there are a few reasons for this desensitization, my Jinglish. One reason being, when we're holding an object, we usually plan to do something with it or to it, right? This means we are most likely focused on our action towards the object. So something similar happens when you touch another person. Your attention is usually directed towards them, to their experience of your touch. So to ensure they feel good when you touch them. We all do this. We all inherently link the concept of action, doing, with giving. We wonder about the right things to do for them. This is like thinking their pleasure is my pleasure, and therefore it's more important that what I directly feel. Yeah? So we are going to turn that around, and that's the key in this entire book. By focusing on the inflow of the sensation coming in through your own skin, you'll not only receive much more pleasure, but be able to tune in more easily to what you want and don't want, and be able to express these desires with clarity. This initial shift is focused, this initial shift in focus will make an immense world of differences to your relationship with self and others. So how we compromise our experience to fit in. You have to do your own growing. It doesn't matter how tall your grandfather was. It's from Abraham Lincoln, a quote. So in any society, the world over, our senses of belonging and connection with others and our tribe is perfectly programmed. Most of us have a social engagement system that is so conditioned to fit in that in order to belong and to be loved, we believe we have to fulfill others' needs and give preferences to their wishes, rather than listening to what we really want. Although cultural differs, each one has their own social engagement system that its citizens tend to adhere to. From my own observation, and generally speaking, examples of this are the UK, where it's common to compromise your boundaries in order to avoid seeming pushy or rude. Germany, where it's socially acceptable to be direct. Here rules are taken very seriously, and it's not uncommon for strangers to shout out at you if they observe you parking your car in the wrong direction or riding your bike without a light. In the US, where people seems to be pushed to achieve personal wealth in order to be accepted. And in Bali, where the opposite is true, without contributing to community duties, you have no social support network and find it very hard to survive. So can you relate to any of this above? In which culture do you live? Due to these cultural systems, we find it hard to go into action towards a sensory felt pleasure that is just for ourselves. Instead, we are often dependent on another person's response to feel something positive. So when we go into action to please others in order to be accepted, we tend to base our action primarily on making the other person happy. This can lead to self-neglect and codependency. This way of interacting not only invites a world of misunderstandings where relationships, but by continuously giving without nourishing ourselves, it increases the chance of burnout. So this is the reason why most of us are no longer aware of the sensory inflow when we touch. We have long forgotten to be acutely present in the sensation pouring into our bodies through the tactile contact. So this socialization of dependency on another for our own pleasure began in infancy at the pre-verbal stage, so that as an adult it is well and truly programmed. Subsequently, we drift away from our own desire and lose motivation to produce action towards sensory felt pleasure of ourselves. So we tend to do or give to others in order to provoke a response from them, trying to indirectly receive the pleasure we seek rather than use the natural capacity of our skin and nervous system to receive the pleasure directly. So it's important to note here that when you're holding an object with one hand and moving it over the other, one hand is in action while the other hand is being done to. After observing that many people had a hard time noticing the inflow via the direct afferent neurons, I realized that this ability was the fundamental base to everything else. So without it, it's difficult to access a deep state of relaxed pleasure. And then here comes a little side note. We assume that the person doing the action is giving and the person being done to is receiving. But actually, who is receiving and who is giving is determined by who the action is for and the agreement made between two people. So if the action is for you, you are receiving. And if the action is for the other, they are receiving. This is the common assumption and understanding. So how is this perception formed? So each one sees what he carries in his heart. This is from Johann Wolfgang from Goethe. If you presume you can take in reliable, rational information about the outside world through your senses of touch and make non-emotional decisions about it, you're about to enter a rabbit hole. While your brain serves up your experience as real, actually the raw data coming in through your sense of touch is blended with your own personal reality as well as the genetic data of your DNA. Your senses are not designed to give you the most accurate representation, is the word, of the outside world. Instead, your brain messes with the data, putting it through filters based on your personal experiences, memories, and belief systems. Depending on your personal conditioning, your brain either emphasizes the data coming in through your senses of touch or diminishes it. So when it comes to general perception, there are three main filters. Deletion occurs when we overlook, tune out, or omit details of our experiences because we either fail to notice them or we disconnect them as unimportant. Distortion. It's a personal prejudice that twists our perception. We amplify or diminish our experience, seeing it differently than someone else may, who has different conditioning and therefore different beliefs and emotional triggers. Generalization occurs when we reach a global conclusion based on one or two experiences, understanding these limited experiences as a general truth while paying no attention to the exceptions. Have you and another person ever remembered completely different details of an experience you had together? I think so. So, biohacking the cerebellum. The cerebellum is the part of the brain which conditions and regulates muscular activity. Due to the conditioning we all experience in regard to touch, this part of the brain is programmed to focus on reaching out to the world. In doing so, we focus on giving while doing rather than receiving while doing. So the transformational work of somatic consent takes you back to your default setting of receiving through touch before social conditioning overrode your body's natural understanding of how to belong. The inflow of sensation is a natural function of the human experience and the foundation of what we tap into in order to biohack previous programming. So when we relearn how to receive, we re-establish an authentic connection to our experience of life and are able to reset, reboot, and engage with more pleasure and connections with the world around us. How tuning into your senses of touch trains your brain. To touch is to experience, but to feel is to live. This is from Lauren Klein. Number 1, your senses of touch is connected to your emotions. Yes. This may come as a surprise to some, but there's no touch sensation without emotions. The two go hand in hand. All streams of information come in via nerves and the spinal cord to the brain and distributes into two different systems. The discriminative system within the somatic sensory cortex is all about the facts. It tells you where on your body you are being touched, in what way, and how intensely. And the emotional touch system within the insula is completely separated. This part gives different kind of touch, their particular emotional tone. So we are used to thinking that certain sensations produce a certain emotion, but this is a trick the brain plays on us. For example, we experience a pain sensation along with a negative emotion reaction because these two different brain systems are active simultaneously. So when you touch something, your brain also compares your past experiences with your present one, so that it can decide whether you are safe or not. This is one reason why the information coming in through your senses of touch is either emphasized or diminished. By tuning into your senses of touch, you develop this is another crazy word, interoception, this one. A deep awareness of inner sensations and emotions. Which increased interoception, you become much more aware of emotions connected to and triggered by prior experiences which usually unconsciously affect your present one. With this deeper awareness, you gain greater clarity in knowing what you want, what you don't want, can more easily communicate your desires and limits, and you are able or more able to self-regulate in times of stress. We will come back to this theme later when we talk about creating safety in relationship to consent. The second point, it wakes you up to your internal experience and whole body awareness. So we are hardwired to pay attention to sensations that originate in the outside world and to discount ones that originate from our own motions. So as you walk down the street moving your limbs and torso, your clothes move against your body, but you don't usually notice the sensations at all, right? The sensations that result from our own movements don't enter our consciousness because they're strongly suppressed. So our awareness is focused on making connections to the outside world. In terms of evolution, this is an important part for survival. It's where the things are that we might want to eat and that we might want to mate with, that we might want to run away from. So in the same way, when you attempt to please yourself, electrical signals flow from the motor cortex in your brain down to the muscles of your arm and hand so that you can produce pleasure through movement. And a copy of the signals also goes to a part of the brain called the cerebellum. The cerebellum transforms the signals into inhibitional signals that feeds them into the somatic sensory cortex, the fact-based touch center, which suppresses the sensations. And this is the very reason it feels so different when pleasuring yourself than when another person is touching you. Have you ever thought of that? That's fascinating. However, when you slow down enough to tune in, you include the posterior insula, the emotional touch system. Then, when you are in movement, motor impulses combine with the sensosomotor cortex and you experience an inflow of feeling that might seem alienating or strange. So this is what I call neurological biohacking that is taking place. So this somatic experience comes with the benefit of deeper connection to feeling, thereby enriching and intensifying your sense of touch. So somatic consent is based on awareness of this sensory inflow, which is specifically related to pleasure and connection. Number 3, it helps identify whether an action is for you or for them. So your body's natural somatic function related to action and touch is always either for your benefit or pleasure or for their benefit or pleasure, so the other person. This means that in order to do one, you have to fully stop doing the other. In order to be in pleasure for yourself, you have to stop being in action for pleasure of the other. Of course, they can exist simultaneously, but we have to stop focusing on one in order to find the other. So once you stop being in action for others, you can find the deepest layers of your own pleasure. The moment you are able to bridge the motor part of your brain, which instructs the muscles to move, and the sensory part, what are you feeling in the moment, you access your preconditioned brain and connect with your subconscious mind. Here you access the potential to reset and reboot your system of engagement with self and others and rewire it back into wholeness. Okay, let's see, how much more do we have here? So 3 more pages. Where are we? Yes. So, waking up your hands, tuning into pleasure. There is a bigger universe at hand. That's from Mark Webb. Okay, so this is getting more personal. So I had my first orgasm when I was around 11 years old and was, of course, immediately hooked. I masturbated more often than I brushed my teeth, and at the age of 15 I experienced ejaculation for the first time. This, as I'm sure you can relate, increased my fascination. At 16 I began to have intercourse with a girl of the same age. We explored a lot, and as a teenager and young man I continued to be very sexually active and truly enjoyed sensual play. I was always very potent and would orgasm as much as possible. And at some point I picked up the term multi-orgasmic and presumed it meant that a multi-orgasmic man could orgasm and ejaculate as much as he wanted to. But then my highest score was 12 orgasms during one night in 3 different encounters. And at 27 I fell deeply in love. We locked ourselves up in a room for a week like junkies with a high quality drug, and we didn't eat or sleep, and we had constant sex. I was still counting orgasms at that point, and I remember that tally was 25, and then something different happened. I crashed. emotionally, physically, and psychologically. I felt sick for 3 months. I couldn't eat or couldn't sleep. I had constant headache and nausea. On top of that, and the most disconcerting was I found any thoughts about sex disgusting. I became depressed and suicidal, ending up on one night on a balcony. My hands were holding the railing and the impulse to jump was in my legs. Game over. Well, very nearly. Instead, I got a terrible pain in my chest, collapsed and cried for hours. Then it happened. Two words come out of nowhere: love and tantra. This was a few years before the internet was established, and I had no idea where the word tantra was coming from. The message was remarkably clear within all the confusion and pain, and I knew I had to follow it up, no matter what. The next morning I went to the biggest bookstore in town and looked up the word. They had 2 books on tantra, and I started reading, slowly and curiously. Every word resonated, and I found myself thinking, well, that's me, and that's me too. The books described spiritual transformation through regulating sexual energy and how to be multiple orgasmic without the orgasm of procreation. Love and tantra and how to get there I was sold, and I dedicated from that day on. One part of those books, now the sun is coming really into the window here. Okay, I think that works. So one part of those books is the cornerstone of everything I'm offering today. The present that occurs when noticing the sensation you feel in your hands and when you touch, and the sensation you feel in your body when we touched. And after 25 years of research, I've given up trying to exactly define what love or tantra is. Living it and sharing it with the world is much more exciting. So joy at your fingertips. So joy is at the tips of your fingers, and all we have to do is simply feel it. However, due to all the factors influencing our senses of touch, the seemingly trivial task of experiencing pure sensation when in action becomes challenging. Trying to grasp the dynamics of sensory inflow with your intellect won't get you very far, and to become fluently aware of your sensory inflow, you have to retrain your physiological experience of it so that your body remember on a cellular level. So we can get around the brain hardwiring with the simple practicing of waking up the hands. This practice is so incredibly simple that many dismiss it, thinking it can't be that easy. By the way, I just would like to share here that I have the Somatic Consent Academy, where we meet twice a week, where we're doing a 15-minute hand meditation, and then we have another hour of talking about experiences related to that. Just to notice that here. So I'd like to underline just how very important this practice is. It's the only doorway to all the treasure in this book. Okay, I would like to say that again here, because this is where everything is built on. That with the waking up the hands exercise, I can't underline it enough how important it is to practice this. It is the only doorway to all the treasure in this book. So you can't grasp that on a rational level. You have to experience that in your skin, in your hands, to make it a emotional, embodied truth, reality. So the 2 types of neurons associated with touch. Neurons are brain and nervous system cells responsible for receiving sensory input from the external world and sending motor commands to your muscles. So you move and you feel something. That's the important part I would like to look at. So they both relay information via electrical signals. They are 2 types of neurons within the somatic nervous system, known as the afferent and the efferent, one with an A, one with an E. So afferent neurons support sensory inflow coming from the skin. And when you feel your heartbeat, notice you're hungry need to go to the toilet or when you touch somebody or something, they carry the sensory data from your internal body and external skin to your brain. That was the afferent with an A. The efferent with an E carry motor impulses from your brain to your muscles so that you can move parts of your body towards something in action. And they are responsible for everything that is movement based. So, after observing that many people had a hard time noticing the inflow via the efferent neurons, I realized that this ability was the fundamental base to everything else. Without it, it's difficult to access a deeper state of relaxed pleasure. The potential to psychologically engage a relaxed state of pleasure is crucial to maintaining balance, empowerment, and deep intimacy within a relationship. And this is why when working with clients and students, I always begin with the fundamental step of waking up awareness of afferent with an A inflow. So how does waking up the hands work? Your brain isn't a static entity. It is constantly being shaped by everything around you, and most of the time we are unaware of this process and therefore don't have much control over it. Within your brain, neurons communicate at dedicated sites called synapses through use of neurotransmitters. And so when neurons communicate regularly with each other, long-term memories and habits form. And this process is called long-term potentiation, LTP, or neuroplasticity. You might have heard that one. So when you practice waking up your hands, you nourish and nurture a new way of experiencing your world. And this increases the efficiency of communicating. Again, this increases the efficiency of communication between the neurons responsible for the new embodied memory. It creates a new habit of being naturally aware of sensory inflow, as well as increasing your ability to self-regulate in times of emotional upheaval and stress. So all you have to do is slowly feel an object with your hands for just 5 minutes per day. So, the sun is coming around the corner here. Let us move here. Another 2 minutes. Again, I repeat that all you have to do is slowly feel an object with your hands for 5 minutes a day. And the rest of the book is based on this experience. So please don't miss that. It's so important to make the difference. It sounds very simple, doesn't it? And it is. Thought the simple process has tremendous results. After only 3 minutes of practice, oxytocin is released, which begins to regulate the nervous system. Oxytocin is the love and connection neurotransmitter and hormone directly linked to human bonding and increases trust and loyalty. Feeling an object for 5 minutes allows oxytocin to flood your nervous system. Much like breathing, sleeping and drinking, feeling and connecting through oxytocin is a necessity need for human survival. The release of oxytocin allows the nervous system to stay regulated. In this way, touch-related connection is vital to our existence. So the practice activates the safe part of the parasympathetic system, which includes a calm, relaxed state. This pleasurable state of relaxation is vital for our well-being. It's not only aids physical and mental balance and healing, but recalibrates the entire manner in which we relate with others. So when we're deprived of oxytocin, we tend to ignore, avoid and suppress any uncomfortable feelings and emotions that come up. I call that the numbness bar. We will explore this in depth later here in the book. So what's important to be aware of is how that emotion go hand in hand with pleasant sensation. Repressing one inherently affects your ability to experience the other. So feeling an object is not about love or relationship. It's about whether sensory neurons in your hands can connect with the pleasure center in your brain. So here we go to the first map in the book, and I will put a link in the description of this live, and probably somewhere here around the video you can just click and then you go straight to the video description, how pleasure in your hands work, about what I've just read in that book. I hope you enjoy that so far. A little bit rusty when it comes to reading, specifically live, and see you in the next part of chapter 1. Enjoy your day.